Now, they wouldn't let us, they, meaning the United States government, would not let us go to Aksum when we went, the year we went to Ethiopia, because the war with Eritrea had just ended the week before. And Aksum is like from here to Evergreen Park, from Eritrea. And the flip side, funny side of that whole fiasco, when we could not get to Aksum, we wanted to go see they let the men in to see the ark. We pulled up in Bahadar, in that hotel. There was a guy with the San Antonio hat on. There was a man, when our little bus was pulling up, there was a brother, and you could tell by his eyes, he was either Eritrean or Ethiopian, the marking in his eyes, and he had this San Antonio Spurs baseball cap on. So we put our stuff in our room, and I went running downstairs looking for him. He was in the bar, and I went in there and I said, "You speak English?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, San Antonio. I said, "But you look," he said, "Well, I was born here, my family's here, but I've been living in San Antonio now about 15 years. And we got to talking about how many people there, there's African Americans coming to find out about the country, so forth and so on. He said, "Have you been up to Aksum?" And we said, "No, our State Department would not let us go to Aksum, the visa. We could not get a visa to go to Aksum because of the war with Eritrea." And he started laughing. He said, "What?" I said, The war just ended. That's why the State Department wouldn't let us go." He said, "Sit here and listen, just listen for a few minutes." I said, "What?" "Listen." We listened, we hear military jets flying over our heads. He said, "If there were to be an attack, it would be here on Bahadar. This is where the military is stationed. This is where the Air Force is stationed." He said, "Didn't you notice when you were landing how they made you pull the screen down on your window? They wouldn't let you look out because they don't want you to see how many planes are there for you to be calling back, telling where the planes are, where they parked." He said, "This is the military center. This is the target if there were to be an attack. Ain't nothing in Aksum but some temples and some religious things. They don't want Aksum." But our State Department would not let us go up there. But the Ethiopians say, yes, that's exactly where it is. Now, they ain't letting nobody else come in there and get it. No, they guard it. It's guarded. You have a question?
Yes. What do you think of when I was a youngster and everything? They said the American Indians, the Native Americans and everything, they did not accept Christianity, and so they would not accept slavery. So then they had to send missionaries to Africa or whatnot to bring in the Africans to be slaves, but the Indians would not accept us by no means. Would you make them slaves because they wouldn't work for it? They just millions of them here at the time. Millions of the Native Americans were here, of course,
and millions got killed, and millions died because they couldn't take the southern plantation heat that the Africans could. That we killed. We, meaning the colonizers that came into this country, not just native North Americans, they killed all the ones in the Central and South America, almost all of the ones in Central and South America. And many, you're right, many of them fought, but many of them did become Christian. But it had nothing to do with, they went to get us because the Indians wouldn't work. It had to do with, there were more of us than there were of them. In terms of Africa, that's black gold. In terms of all the 19 countries out of which they were stealing those who they were selling into chattel slavery. There's several factors, and there's several different books. I'm glad you raised that. Cornel West says, thank you for your question. Several books that deal with Indian, Native American, Indian history and African Indian history and Africans in the Americas along with the Indians. And one of the things that it points out that the reason there was a problem with the Indians being put into slavery that there was not with the Africans had nothing to do with Christianity and accepting Christianity. It had to do with this was the Indians' home. You ain't from here. If you escape out into the woods, where you going? The Indians know this like they know the palm of their hand. They know which plants are going to kill you and which ones not to eat, and they can survive out in the bush because this is their home. Africans brought to this country, first of all, did not come straight to this country. They came through the Caribbean. And then they're brought up here on plantations in chains, but very different. This is all strange territory to them. The Seminole, that's why the country started putting them on plantations, because as long as they were roaming loose, they could elude us and slip into the bush. We never would find them. That's one of the pieces. The other piece was they were accepting Africans into their tribes. They were accepting what we call buffalo soldiers. And several Africans became not only members of the nations, and I'll come back to that Indian nation piece in a minute, not only accepting them, but embracing them and allowing them to marry and rise up the ranks to the position of chief. I was with Russell Means, coming back to the nation terminology, because you tripped over it like I did way back then. In 1984, I was with Russell Means, who is a chief, one of the native tribes here in the United States of America. And in '84, that was a time when we were very conscious about whether we say Native Americans, Native Americans, indigenous people, and I was tripping all over what to call him. I just wanted him to tell me the name of the tribe. Is it Comanche? Is it Sioux? Is it Arapaho? Navajo? So I can say that, because I'm tripping with this Indian and Native American. And he laughed. He said, "It's really okay for you to call us Indian. We do not take offense at that." Well, we had been taught they took offense because Columbus was sailing for the West Indies, and he thought he had found some Indians in the West Indies. And he laughed and he said, no. Went to his room and came back from his room and hotel and brought a document, and the document was in Spanish. He said, "You read Spanish?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Read this. For whom did Columbus sail? Queen Isabella of what country?" So when he writes her, what language is he writing in? That's what he brought me a copy of, one of Columbus's letters to Queen Isabella. And in his letter, he dice sobre la gente en Dios en este país. ¿Entiendes? Dice sobre la gente en Dios en este país. That's what you're translating, Indians, but that's not what he said. He said la gente en Dios. He's describing them. But what is he calling them? The people who are godly. They're so like God. He's calling them en Dios, in God. They're so warm and loving and open, en Dios, in God. These are people who are of God. That was his description of the natives. La gente en Dios. And it's from en Dios, and we don't speak no Spanish, just America. But we got Indian. Indian. He said en Dios, en Dios, en Dios, en Dios. So Russell said, people realize when you're saying Indian, you're taking the English pronunciation of that Spanish en Dios, that he was writing Queen Isabella about us, en Dios, and we consider that a compliment to be called so godlike, that we're like of God, in God. So he said, now if you say Navajo if you like, but we don't get upset when you say en Dios.
How can we improve relations with people that are oppressed all over the world when we don't really understand each other?
The question was, how